I want to welcome you all to this discussion that is organized by the Konrad-Adenauer-Stiftung and the Greek Energy Forum. Well, it is a very important discussion nowadays, how we see our future without coal. Burning coal has devastating effects on public health, the environment, and the global climate. That is something that we know very well by now. Global energy markets are changing. We are changing. The economy without coal is changing, and all that change has also great effects and to the people, and many of them are worried that they have to choose between their jobs or their health. So we need to discuss and to address all these issues in this discussion, and I want to welcome to deliver his welcome speech, Henri Bohnet. He's the director of the Konrad-Adenauer-Stiftung in the Greece and Cyprus office. Mr. Bohnet, the floor to you.
Thank you, Kalispera, and welcome on behalf of the Konrad-Adenauer Foundation. It's a great pleasure to be here today and to open this conference together with our partners from the Greek Energy Forum. Thank you very much, Alex Lagakos and your whole team, for working with us on this and on this very important topic. All over Europe, as we all are aware, we're in the middle of the corona pandemic, and every week of shutdown is making our economies lose millions of euros, and people lose their jobs, shops closing down, and also that means that the European recovery and the recovery of each of our countries will become harder. But with the European Recovery Fund, the Next Generation EU, there is money available to help bring our economies back on track, or at least that's what we hope for. The idea is to spend this money with the future of our economies in mind, to focus on digitalization, sustainability, and green projects. This is because it seems everyone agrees an even bigger crisis than the corona pandemic will be climate change in case we don't do enough, in case we don't put words into action and refocus our economies. But do we have the strategies to implement the biggest change of all, the energy transition? Today, we have invited 4 experts from Greece, from Poland, and from Germany in order to discuss that, to share their views on this topic, and I'm very much looking forward to that. It is our mission as the Konrad-Adenauer Foundation to bring people together and to encourage dialogue in order to move forward with reforms. So in this sense, I want to thank everybody for being here. I want to thank my colleague Eleftheris Petropoulos for making this possible, our partners, and I'm looking very much forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bohnet. And now I want to welcome Alexandros Lagakos. He's the co-founder and vice chairman of the Greek Energy Forum. Mr. Lagakos, the floor to you.
Thank you very much. And just to demonstrate how interdisciplinary and how diverse today's topic is, you will allow me to switch to Greek for this brief introductory remark. So I guess our non-Greek speaking participants can switch to the relevant mode. So very briefly, switching to Greek now. Αν κάτι έγινε χτήμα μας το τελευταίο καιρό είναι πως...
Now, what we have certainly understood is that nothing needs to be taken for granted. Nothing is stable indeed in our daily life. As a consequence, we should not trap ourselves in stereotypes that sometimes are considered as something stable that cannot stay, that cannot change. So if this is the case, this is much more the case, much more true for the energy landscape. And I'm thinking of energy transition. Transition as a term includes the idea of a flow towards something new. So that's transition. The transition to something new has to do with a transition mainly with a greater penetration of power and at the same time coal poorer energy sources. Now, the landscape in which this energy transition takes place is a political union, is a European Union, which was founded some decades ago based on coal. What we need to relinquish today? So is this an identity crisis for Europe? Is it an act of despair in view of climate change? Or rather a legacy that needs to be left for the next generation? In my view, it is all together. Of course, we are not necessarily obliged to identify a problem, especially when this problem arises from the energy, from a vehicle for a technological progress of humanity. However, what is very, very important is to address the problem when this arises, when this explicitly arises. And we usually do not have the flexibility when we lag behind, when we are in delay. Energiewende of Germany some years ago, because of Fukushima accident, or the decision of Greece to proceed with the coal phase out, are great challenges we need to face. So we need, in an organized way, to proceed with actions. And so we need to feel proud as European citizens for living in a union that has a very specific energy vision that sets priority to the quality of life of European citizens. And we need to feel also proud of the fact that we can learn one from the other. One European member state may draw inspiration from best practices from other member states. So this is a very fortunate circumstance, indeed, a very fortunate conjuncture. So this is what we are trying to do in cooperation today with Konrad-Adenauer-Stiftung, that we are grateful for, in order to bring together experts who will share their experiences from the coal phase-out experiments, both in North and South of Europe. I would like to explicitly mention Mr. Matthew for having actually been a source of inspiration for today's meeting. Michalis is indeed a great example of a citizen showing that voluntary work has nothing to envy from a professional endeavor. And this is why I am so grateful to him. And now I would like to give the floor to our speakers. Thank you very much. Indeed, Mr. Lagakos.
Speakers are people that are going to help us understand how the challenges of coal phase outs in the North and South of Europe. I want to welcome Dr. Ioannis Tzortzis. He's the president at the Legal Experts Committee in the Just Transition Steering Committee that is in the Ministry of Environment and Energy. Welcome, Mr. Tzortzis.
Thank you very much.
I want to welcome also Dr. Hubertus Bardt. He is Managing Director and Head of Research in the German Economic Institute in Cologne. Welcome, Dr. Bardt.
Thank you for inviting me.
Ioannis Moraitis, he's the project manager, Hydrogen and Biomethane International and European Affairs in DEPA. It's the Public Gas Corporation of Greece. Welcome, Mr. Moraitis.
Thank you very much for having me.
And Robert Tomaszewski, he's a senior energy analyst and Polityka insight in Warsaw. Welcome to this discussion, Mr. Tomaszewski.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me.
And I want to begin our discussion with two general questions that I want to put to all four of you, and then we will go to the specifics. And I want to begin with Dr. Tzortzis, asking him, are we phasing out of coal-fueled power production fast enough? Are these different approaches between the EU's North and South on the issue? The floor to you, Dr. Tzortzis.
Right. Thank you very much. Both the very well-known, widely acclaimed Konrad-Adenauer-Stiftung and the Greek Energy Forum, of course. Since my presentation is going to be in Greek, I would like to change into speaking Greek. And then I can take any questions, any clarifications that need to be made in English. Right. So, what we have here, that's a dream. In in a word. It's a dream of a new era, of a new Greece. Είναι η δίκαιη αναπτυξιακή μετάβαση στην απανθρακοποίηση.
That is a just development transition towards coal phase out. The regulatory power of the real, of what is real, and what we mean by that. Now, I have been fortunate enough to have worked for the Energy Regulatory Authority, and I have seen that great efforts have been made by many stakeholders in the regions mainly affected by coal phase out, because of course this is not only an environment-related issue, but rather also economic one. Coal phase out started more than 10 years ago, but let us have a look at what we have in the future. Now, Greece has committed to withdrawing all the lignite, the coal-fired factories, plants by 2028, most of them by 2023, in the framework of the National Plan for Energy and Climate. The main objective is the just development transition of the regions affected and the minimization of consequences for the regions affected. Now, on the basis of the National Plan for Energy and Climate, our aspirations are quite ambitious. In other words, we intend to increase at least 35% the RES share. We intend to increase the RES share from 61 to 64% when it comes to the gross power consumption, to reduce the final power consumption, and of course to minimize to zero, actually to have 0% of lignite share in power generation, which will bring about at least 42% of the gas emissions. These are the commitments, these are the objectives that now Greece has. And just to have an idea of where we stand in Europe, we are one of the mainly affected countries in this process, because what people do not know, the reliance on lignite is much higher than any other country in Europe. In other words, this is quite a radical change when it comes to Greece, but as I said at the beginning, this has already started. So this undertaking has already started, and now we need to face a reality that we need to manage. Coal phase out started many years ago, but without a specific plan, without a specific program, and without a roadmap to offset the consequences for the people that are losing their jobs in the regions affected. So now we need to come up with a plan. So this strategic roadmap has been drafted through a cooperation between the state and PPC, the Public Power Corporation. Allow me also to add that there are some main reasons for coal phase out, and the main reasons for coal phase out are not only environmental reasons, but mainly economic. The lignite is not a sustainable fuel, has no reason to stay here. The PPC has suffered great losses, and indeed we have great loss in general when it comes to sustainability. And we are talking about decarbonization, about utter decarbonization. We intend to cease our reliance on fossil fuels, including lignite, and this has to do, of course, this applies to our islands as well. And our islands exclusively rely on oil. As a result, the plants on the islands are far more expensive when it comes to their operation. And so we have not a real situation. The prices on the islands are not real. And so this has to change.
We see a decline in production and a reduction of the different units since 2011 registered. And this highlights what I'm telling you, that the coal phase out has started for the last many years. We are trying right now in this time conjuncture to make it more systematic and having a specific goal in mind. You see here the difference between the cost of lignite versus the average price of the system. For sure, this has a significant impact on local society. Already we can see that this is not caused by the coal phase out, which becomes more systematic now. I would say that we must preserve 2,000 labor posts. Furthermore, we must protect 1.8 billion euros of added value for the local economy. We must also safeguard teleheating. All these prerequisites are very important, and it is true that we really need to be in a very close collaboration with local societies, because we are not interested in being in our offices draft some plans about others. No, we are in constant consultation with local societies, spotting the problems. Local societies have one characteristic, that throughout the many years which existed as an information, there has been one monoculture when it comes to the lignite extraction. In cases like Kozani, it reaches 51.5%, and in Florina, 59% approximately. We are talking about significant figures. I don't know whether you agree. I don't know how manageable this is, but in any case, we have made up a national master plan which goes beyond the European expectations. This master plan has been built on 5 pillars, which are about clean energy, industry, manufacture, trade, then smart agricultural production, sustainable tourism, technology, and education. It's not just about the energy endeavor, it's an energy endeavor, but we're also interested in changing the productive model of different territories. We are not just interested in more RES or in changing and shutting down the lignite plants. We are interested in giving an alternative in this world, in these cases. In these territories, there was no alternative. This is what we want to do. Already, there are some important samples of this awakening of the new interest shown by investors in areas that used to be the black holes, not just as images from the extraction of lignite, but also when it comes to the investing opportunities that were there. Already, we have 80 investing plans coming from the private sector about proposals for more than 3.5 billion euros. There is an open call for investments, and I would like that to be taken into account by the viewers and the spectators of this event. Why? Because this is underway. We are interested in quick wins. We are interested in moving this procedure as soon as possible. When you have a patient that is bleeding, you will not adjourn facing the problem in the future. No, we are already lagging behind. We should have done that yesterday. This is not the case. That is why now we are running to make it happen. The idea that we have for Western Macedonia, for instance, is about the installation of a PV park, 2.3 gigawatts, with an industrial park of electrification, smart agricultural units to produce top-notch technology, ecosystems of wine tourism, and clinics of rehabilitation. Likewise, we are trying to safeguard that we will not lose any labor post. On the contrary, we shall create new ones. We're talking about the creation of 500 direct and 500 indirect labor posts for an area where there is a continuous loss of jobs. This is very, very important, even if these figures might not be impressive, but this is just the beginning. For megalopolis, we can see that there will be PV parks up to 550 megawatts, some pharmacies, industries, smart livestock breeding, model thematic parks of adventure and recreation and investment coming from the public sector, since there is a proximity with the capital. We are talking about the creation of 200 direct and 200 indirect labor costs. But to do so, it is very important, and this is my involvement in that, it's important to create a very serious governance network. How can we materialize all that? I have undertaken, and I have been honored by Mr. Nosoroulis and the Greek government to be the president of the Legal Experts Committee that has undertaken the gigantic task to draft any legal reforms that might be needed to implement this vision, that is, to materialize this vision. To do so, we need some surgical reforms to use different financing tools up to more than 5 billion euros. Everybody must contribute to that, the government, the federal government, the local societies, the ministries, different companies. There is this coordination committee with Mr. Nosoroulis, which plays a key role in the development of all this scheme and this structure. Here, you can see the pyramid of the different financing tools that we want to use through this direct implementation of this project. The faster we can make it happen right now, we are first in Europe that has evolved in this procedure. We will be able to use the huge resources that are available for us right now, as Mr. Lagakos said before, by the Recovery Fund. Now, upon the new regulation on the Fair Transition Fund, we have big budgets from Invest in You, the European Investment Bank, the European Fund of Regional Development, ECB Plus, and the Cohesion Fund, moreover natural resources and agricultural resources. Then we're talking about a specific use of specific provisions coming from the regulation of Fair Transition Fund, which give us access to this huge budget. It is under consultation up to April 19th. This is something to be taken into account by the speakers and the spectators, because we are asking for the participation. It is a necessary constituent of this effort, being active. In this framework, we have set in consultation the different territorial plans, which are not just about Megalopolis or Western Macedonia, and right now this is under consultation, but there will be a third one about the islands. We need to see green islands, specific islands. We need to see islands where there are some models in the framework of safeguarding the energy needs coming from RES, of course. And of course, let us see the plants there to be shut down. The committee of legal experts consists of 14 scientists who are specialized in this matter, and already we have come up a specific legal framework on the just transition. We want to have a special vehicle, and let me tell you that this will be of special purpose, and we'll have to take the ownership and the upgrade of different lands of the EU, the PPC that is, and up to now, this was used by PPC to extract lignite, to use it for the grid. Then we need to add some procedure and attract other investment. Then there will be new master plans coming from the public sector. We need to finalize some strands of incentives. We need to guarantee financing coming from the European funds, putting at the forefront the resilience fund, the recovery and resilience fund, the RRF. And then we need to finalize the different public investment. This is up to now our initiative, what our committee is doing. We are halfway through, as you can see here, when it comes to the implementation of this provisions and how we can turn them into legal texts. The crucial initiative and the Greek iconic effort is that these areas will be owned by the public sector under a special purpose vehicle. And these will own and will be responsible for the implementation of 4 different land uses. This is of paramount importance in the implementation of the program, because it's not just about any private company to move on, but shall undertake, rather the responsibility shall be undertaken by the Greek state. And I believe that this is a procedure that may create to all of us a sense of optimism that it will move on quite rapidly and in an effective way. We're talking about the front-loaded timeline up to 2023. Up to that point, there will be the finalization of the majority of the provisions of the master plan. Then there will be the phasing out of all units apart from one, which will be phased out in 2025, Ptolemaida 5. The ownership will belong to the public sector. We will have started the restoration of lands, and there will be some supportive activities as well. Just to give you an idea, I would like to demonstrate that from scratch. I've said that to Mrs. Linardatou just to give you an overview. When we're talking about the heart of the ligna, of the coal phase-out zones, here you can see the extraction zones and the plants. We are talking about black deserts. I don't know how many of you have visited these spots, but we are looking into creating from scratch something new. It's not a white canvas. No, it's a black desert out there, unfortunately. Now, the suggested land uses by the NTUA, National Technical University, are the following. The whole image changes, and I'm talking about the development of these areas through PV parks, industrial parks, the different ashes deposition lands, agricultural zones, and then the provision of different points of pasture. This happens in Ptolemaida. This happens in Megalopoli as well. It is true that in spite of difficulties, in spite of time limitations, so that we can be able to use the maximum of the budgets, there is a vision behind all that, which we need to achieve, because we believe in what we are doing. We are a team of experts, and I believe that we can deliver into that. I can guarantee that we are based on data-based theoretical projects, like what was said before about Mr. Matsoulakis. We have no other incentive other than our love. And you can see this image coming from a visit that it was paid by an NGO in 2010, back in 2010, in Johannesburg, South Africa. You could see a plant producing energy, which was using coal, and then it turned into a symbol of the apartheid fall. Why? Because this plant was used to cover needs of the white people. It was within the Soweto, the well-known neighborhood of the black people. This is a revolution in terms that will allow us to use this effort, and for this effort to become a heritage for everybody. We need everybody with us, and we hope that we can benefit them all. Thank you so much. I'm here for you for any question. Thank you. Unfortunately, you're off. Your mic is muted. Sorry for that.
I'm sorry, I was on mute. We heard Dr. Tzortzis. Thank you very much for your presentation. And I want to go to you now, Dr. Bardt. Dr. Tzortzis talked about a coal-free revolution that is beginning in Greece. And for the people that want to make that revolution a success. What do you think is going on in the whole of Europe, the European Union, and in Germany? Are we going fast enough in getting rid of the coal, and are we in the same pace, the north and the south of the European Union?
Well, thank you very much for the question. I think the main issue would not be, are we fast enough in phasing out of coal, but are we fast enough in reducing our carbon emissions? And that's the ultimate goal and what we have to do to meet our climate targets. But looking a bit closer at coal, and especially from the German perspective of what has happened there, there's a two-phase situation. There have been two phases of phasing out of coal. The first one was phasing out of hard coal. And we stopped producing hard coal in 2018 after it has been subsidized for decades because there wasn't any economic reason anymore. So it was too costly to produce it in Germany, but for security of supply reasons, or especially for protecting the people employed in these mining facilities, it has been subsidized for years and years, and therefore also had a high share in electricity production. So, but that has been for economic reasons that stopped in 2018 finally. Look, so that was kind of the first phase, and after reducing production of hard coal, reduced or the share of hard coal used in electricity production also dropped. The rest has been then imported from Poland, from South Africa, from Russia especially. And now the second phase is about lignite. Lignite was feasible without any kind of subsidies. So there was that business case for lignite, even in times with relatively high, but then obviously very low emission costs for the last couple of years. And the general decision was that the cap of the emission trading scheme all over Europe defines the maximum of carbon emissions in manufacturing sector or parts of the manufacturing sector and electricity production. So what we have been discussing then is, should we do something within that or added to that cap by reducing the production and usage of lignite then. And so in the end it was, and you've been asking, was it fast enough? That is a trade-off situation, obviously. On the one hand side, no, it's not fast enough when it comes to reducing emissions, as long as the ETS cap is can be reduced at the same speed. So for climate reasons, no, it's not fast enough. The other question was, what are the costs and the structural effects? What are the regional effects, especially? So what's happening in the regions? And we are talking about 60,000 people employed directly and indirectly in these industries, and partly in regions with not many other industries and opportunities. And the other point is, what about security of supply in electricity, which we need 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, especially for private households, but the larger part for manufacturing. And we are phasing out of coal, so out of hard coal, and also hard coal consumption, out of lignite, and phasing out of nuclear. So we are at a very high speeds transferring or transforming our the base of our electricity production. And that was the reason why in these, well, let's say, not only political, but in this discussions about costs and benefits, about speeding up for climate reasons and doing it not too quick in order to maintain stability and guarantee supply of electricity. The final result was to say we'll phase out until 2035 with one moment every 3 years when there will be a review looking, can we be quicker or do we have to be some slower? So, and I think the political pressure will be more the question, can we be quicker? And therefore I think that concept will lead to a reduction of lignite production and therefore lignite-based emissions, which is as quick as possible.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bardt. Now to you, Mr. Moraitis, I want you to ask the same question. Are we going fast enough? Or are we going more fast than we need to go?
Okay. First of all, thanks again for inviting me. Thank you to Mr. Lagakos and to the whole team and to the Konrad-Adenauer-Stiftung for organizing this event, which I believe is very important. And I think that in the future we should see more of events that deal with these questions, because I think that this is something that, you know, the wider public needs to be aware of. And I think for now, this is not happening to the degree it should. So coming back to your question, fast enough or not, the question is, what is fast? That's the one hand of the question. And the other hand, on the other hand is, what do we do once we get to the point where we need to have a solution ready? So Mr. Tzortzis described it very, very nicely in the case of Western Macedonia, with the electricity demand, with the lignite that is, you know, being phased out. But what happens when you get to the point where you actually need to replace every kilowatt hour of electricity? And that's the main question, because right now, everyone is talking about renewable energy sources, right? Solar PV parks, offshore, onshore wind parks. You know, you have all these huge technological advancements, you know, floating wind parks, not floating, onshore, not shore, small, high, everything. And the same applies to basically to the solar panels that are now being also, especially in Greece and in Southern Europe, are being promoted very, very strongly. But what do you do with this electricity that you get from renewable energy sources? That's the question. Because as we all know, renewable energy sources, they have the intermittency, and you need to find a solution to that, right? So how is it possible to replace this huge amount of lignite-produced electricity via renewable energy sources, but with a way of providing electricity 24 hours, 7 days a week, right? And I think if you pose this question, of course, there are numerous answers to it, but I think the one that is the most convincing right now, also on a European level, is hydrogen, right? Hydrogen is being promoted strongly by the European Commission. We have seen huge steps towards this direction. We've seen the European Hydrogen Strategy. We have seen the establishment of the Clean Hydrogen Alliance, which is basically tasked with getting a pipeline of projects, large-scale projects across Europe in order to promote this technology and in order to show that this technology is the solution for basically integrating renewable energy sources to the energy mix of a country, right? And I think that while the North, in this, to come back to your question, while the North in this regard, so regarding hydrogen and the technologies associated with this, fuel or energy carrier, or as you can call it, I think the South is a bit behind. The interesting fact, however, is that the South has a huge potential on this matter, while the North hasn't. So a very good example is that RWE, right? They are investing right now 1 billion euro in Germany, while investing 4 billion euro abroad. It shows that basically the future of renewable energy sources, it is not Central Europe anymore. It will be decentralized. The South will play a key role in this discussion, in this development. And I think it's important that, you know, we pick up this trend and we try to promote it in, you know, in our countries, in the South, in Greece, for example, which is, You know, it's a country with huge potential when it comes to renewable energy sources. It could be really a lighthouse country in this regard. And I think that we are lacking a bit. We should go, you know, I think we should be braver, if you want, to go forward in this regard. And of course, this is not something that is only being delegated by the industry, but this is something that is also a political discussion and a political decision at the end of the day, right? So every member state at the end of the day will decide how to go forward. The only thing and the only compass that we have, or our north, if you want, in the compass, is basically the Green Deal. It's decarbonizing Europe, becoming the, you know, the emission-free 2050, and all these very nice things that are being proclaimed by the Commission, by Mr. Timmermans, respectively. And this is basically our compass. But how we will get there, this is a thing that needs to be addressed regionally, so, you know, as a country itself, and then collectively on a European level. So this is, I think, when it comes to speed, I think it could be better. I think that if you delay a certain decision, you will just delay the solution, right? So I think it's better if you come, you know, you're faced with the end question, okay, what do we do now? And then you need to act, and then you need to find the solution. Then you will find the solution at the end of the day. Instead of saying, okay, we will see, and we're doing little tiny baby steps, and at some point we will see. I think this is not the way to go. For me, it's important to really set ambitious targets, like Greece has done, obviously. I mean, we're phasing out of coal 10 years earlier than Germany. Of course, Germany has different aspects to consider. They also have the nuclear phase out. They have other things that, you know, delay this process. But we as Greece, I think it's a great thing that, you know, we have set this ambitious target. And I think we should really take this opportunity and make this ambition work in the future by finding the correct solution, basically, for Western Macedonia and for Greece as well.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moraitis. And now I want to go to you, Mr. Tomaszewski, and take it from the end of what Mr. Moraitis said. Are we brave enough? Should we be braver? Although, as we understand, it's a huge task.
I think it's an enormously huge task, and the pace of transformation is getting like speeding up every year. If we compare the data between 2015 and 2020, we see that the electricity production from lignite and hard coal in whole European Union dropped almost by 50%. This is like enormous number. I don't see the division between, in this case, just about the coal, between north and south. I see more the division between west and east. East is still more dependent, with glorious example of my country, Poland, more dependent on coal energy. But the pace of this transformation is speeding up enormously. Just by 4 last years, we decreased the share of coal in our energy mix by more than 10 percentage points. It is, of course, a small number if we are comparing, for example, Greek achievements in that matter. Just between 2019 and 2020, we see the drop by 40%. The same problem with slower pace of transformation has Czech Republic. So I think that this division here is more relevant. But as Dr. Bardt mentioned it, we observing what is happening now on the CO2 market with the prices of CO2 far above the level of 40 euros per ton. We can forecast that this process will speed up in coming months and years to some enormous pace. I believe that we shouldn't now be exactly focusing our attention on the speed of this process, because it's fast and it will go in one direction. We will reach it, but we should focus on how create enough capacity in renewables, in other sources, nuclear, gas, hydrogen in the future, just to fulfill this void, which will create the coal exit in countries. And by saying that, I see two main challenges for whole this process. The first one is the energy security, which will be challenged by the regulation. And here is the year 2025 very important, for example, for countries like Poland, which are basing their energy mix on coal. After this year, we won't be able to subsidize coal power plants from capacity mechanism according to European law. Meaning that with more than 70% of coal inside our energy mix, we will be dropping it in the speed of light with this kind of pace. Polish government yesterday published a new energy policy, which is saying that in 2033, so in 12 years, we should have first nuclear power plant. It is absolutely unreachable target. We believe that if we're going to have first nuclear power plants in 20 years, in 2040, we will be extremely lucky. So we have a problem that after 2025, we won't have enough capacity to make our system safe. There is, of course, we can build more interconnectors. We can, and this is happening. We can import more electricity from Sweden, from Germany, but it will be challenging for all Poland's neighbors. Germany is phasing out coal. It's phasing out nuclear capacity. So this years will be really challenging. And the second thing is the energy poverty, because we analyze this process of the European climate policy from the perspective of fighting with climate change, but we cannot forget about this factor, about this that the whole process of transformation will be extremely expensive, and there will be winners of this process. For example, prosumers, the people who will produce their own electricity from the rooftops, photovoltaics, but there will be also losers, the people who will lose jobs in the mines, in factories, also older people who will pay bigger bills for their electricity. And this process, because we are just in the beginning of this process of transformation, it will last for 2 or 3 decades till reaching the climate neutrality goal. In this process, there will be a lot of social anger. And the answer from the political class should be here to answer this anger, to try to make this whole process with human face, with a welfare state and support for those who will be in the biggest need. So I think, like, answering your question, that the pace is good. It will accelerate. So we're gonna be on the way to fulfill our obligation. Of course, if we're going to invest more in renewables and in this capacity to make, for example, this reduction, 55% reduction till 2030, achievable. But we have to remember that the speed is only the one factor. If we drop the social part of this process, we will endanger whole process, because, for example, populist parties are looking very much for some kind of subject which will replace immigration. During pandemia, it is happening all over Europe. The populist parties drop this subject because we have closed borders, so they cannot use it as a political tool. But now, with the transformation and the electricity bills going up, there is a new fuel for this kind of move. And so we have to remember about this factor in this whole process. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now I want to go back to you, Dr. Tzortzis, because you explained to us very well and very eloquently how difficult and how huge a task is for Greece to get rid of coal. And I want to ask you, why do we do it so fast? And we do it till 2023, when we could have taken our time and do it by 2030, which is what is the target from the European Union. Is it necessary? Is it better to do it so fast. And when you showed us that there will be also social consequences with the people that will be out of a job in Western Macedonia.
Right. Thank you. I think that this way of looking at things is, like I said, quite wrong, because I think that we're not fast enough. It's something that we need to tackle, we need to face, that we're talking about a situation that is already happening. Like what Mr. Moraitis said, we're not moving fast enough. We have to tackle a huge economic and social problem. And out of this challenge, we're going to promote a new alternative for development in Greece. That's why, although the idea and the title of the fund in Europe is just transition, here in Greece we're talking about just development transition, because we think that development is a crucial side of it all, and development cannot wait. There is a criticism throughout Europe that is not moving enough, that the pace is not fast. It's a bit awkward to have to be criticized as a country for moving fast. I think that if we going to materialize what we have already in a strategic plan very eloquently prescribed, we're going to set an example in the region. Already, I have to reassure you that countries like North Macedonia, like Bulgaria, is trying to follow our example. And because these areas are just neighboring areas to those countries, we're not going to have any serious effect in reducing CO2 emissions if the neighbors don't do the same. So we're in very close cooperation with especially these two countries to be able to develop common projects in trying to achieve the same speed in developing this idea and actually putting into practice and make it real. Because the question is not just philosophical, is of everyday life in those areas, and they are very badly hit. There is a huge movement for actually these areas losing their strength, their people. They're moving to other parts of Greece. They're moving to other countries who have a situation like we used to have 50 years ago. We're talking about a real serious problem. And this problem has become even worse during the pandemic. You know, since you are very well aware of what is happening in our country, that those areas, especially in Kozani, have been very badly hit by the pandemic. And there is always a sense in those areas of being forgotten by the state. And we're here to reassure those people that they have not been forgotten at all, that they have alternatives, that they have reason to stay in their regions, and that there is possibly a better day tomorrow. So our project is not just about environment, it's about development. And I think that we're probably not fast enough. We want to have the biggest impact, and this is not going to happen by waiting. Like I said in my beginning presentation, if you have a person bleeding, you cannot just wait until a whole of blood has just run out. You just have to do something right and there. So we are facing this sort of situation, and of course, talking about what the people before me said about the renewables and the problems that these create, there are of course solutions. Green hydrogen is a very important choice to take. Also, we have plans for energy reserves. I mean, we have energy storage. It's not that there aren't any solutions. We just have to close this chapter and try to check with any other alternatives. We cannot just go on living and reliving this situation. We just have to move on. And it's better to do it sooner than later.
Thank you, Dr. Tzortzis. Now, Dr. Bardt, Germany is, of course, very different from Greece, but it has made on all of us an impression that Germany is using a completely different pace. Greece has the 2023, but Germany, if I'm not wrong, 2035. Why are you so reluctant to change coal?
Well, as I tried to explain earlier, it's not only the phase out of coal. We are phasing out of coal and nuclear at the same time. So our last nuclear reactor will be closed down by the end of next year, and nuclear had a share of a little more than 20% of our energy production. In total, nuclear, hard coal, and lignite was well in the 90s and early 2000s more than 80% of our electricity production, and still 2/3 in 2010. And we are phasing out of all of them in the next years and decades, and have already begun. The share of coal has decreased to a little more than, or a little less than a quarter last year, and even lower, of course, the year before last year, sorry, in 2019, and even lower last year, obviously. So I'm not sure if it's really slow, thinking of where we come from and thinking of the huge problems we have with replacements. We don't have the storage capacity we need. We have huge questions whether importing electricity whenever we need it will be available on the European level. We are not quick enough with enhancing the grids we need, and we are still far away from using hydrogen as a storage medium, if you want, or as a buffer, or as a source of energy for the manufacturing sector, and then it's much more expensive. So it's not an easy task, and it's for our electricity system, and also for the energy-intensive industries who rely on affordable prices. It's already a big step that we are doing. And as I said, you mentioned 2035 as the year, may also be 2038, but there's a process of reviews whether it can be accelerated or not.
Thank you, Dr. Bardt. Mr. Moraitis, I want a little bit to insist on that issue and asking you for the benefits and the disadvantages of these two different ways to see things. I mean, Greece, 2023, Germany, and also Poland in a different pace, because also they are completely different. They have other issues, all of these countries. But how do you see the benefits and the disadvantages? Can you explain that to us?
Of that time frame? Well, the benefits are, first of all, that there is, or it can be adjusted to the success we have in increasing renewable energies, and which is not an easy task. We have lots and lots of discussions locally if windmills should be built and so on. It's not so that everyone welcomes that. We have a problem with, or well, not a problem, but there are limits in adding up solar energy when it's needed 24 hours a day, because obviously solar needs even more storage than wind energy needs, and it gives the regions the opportunity to to adapt to that situation, to that loss of jobs and industries, especially in the eastern part of Germany. It's in regions which are really hard hit, which have been hard hit by the reunification or by the deindustrialization after the end of the GDR, and that's the remaining part of manufacturing which is there. Not many people live there, but for those who live there, it's an important part of the economy. So this kind of structural change takes its time, but you're absolutely right. It shouldn't also take too long. If it takes too long, and if you give the impression that nothing changes, then no one's going to adapt. So that's why I mentioned that it's kind of compromise. You can't draw or make a calculation and have the perfect date for it. I suppose that will be quicker than expected because of increasing prices for the emission trading scheme. That means that more and more coal will be will go out of the market because it's going to get too expensive.
Mr. Moraitis, from your position, you know it very well in DEPA. What is also your opinion? Which are the benefits and the disadvantages from such a policy, the different policies between Greece and Germany, Poland, and other countries in the EU?
I think, first of all, I mean, Dr. Bardt, he explained it very well. I mean, the German case, you know, when we talk about Germany, Germany is always, you know, in the epicenter of these discussions, you know, and why does Germany take so long? Why does Germany does so fast? You know, Germany is always like in the center of discussions. I think if you know, you need to extend the discussion a bit and differentiate between the coal phase out and fossil fuels when we talk about them. So we need to distinguish, okay, what do we mean by coal phase out, which means basically, okay, we stop producing electricity from coal or from lignite in Greece's case. And what does fossil fuel mean? And what does, you know, zero emission by 2050 mean? Because by 2050, we're not talking only about coal. We're talking about every fossil fuel that is out there, including natural gas, right? And while in Central Europe, you know, countries are already looking at alternatives to natural gas. In Greece, we have this discussion about, oh, we're phasing out of coal, right? But natural gas, this is still very important. And it is. It will play a major role also in the transition phase to get to a greener solution, if you want so. Now, if you talk about green gases, I mean, if you take hydrogen as an example, and I think Mr. Bardt will agree, you know, right now, hydrogen, yes, it's not large scale, it's not there yet, but at the end of the day, if you want to reach net zero, you will have to include hydrogen in the whole process. And to get there, right, there will be a transition period, but you need to have in mind that, okay, by 2050, I need to have an infrastructure ready for this green gas or whatever other green gas or renewable gas there will be, right? Which means infrastructure, natural gas infrastructure, repurposing, retrofitting, you know, these are all discussions that are going on right now on a European level, and we need to follow up on them. And we need to be in the front, you know, because if you just wait, you will not be ready to catch up. And that's the key element here. I think that while in Germany or other countries, but since we're talking about Germany, because Germany is you know, far ahead in these discussions, you know. They have a national hydrogen strategy. They are investing huge amounts of money into, you know, deploying these technologies and advancing these technologies. While in the South, you don't have this still, right? And I think this is a difference which we as people of the South, if you want, need to balance again, because it's a huge opportunity for our countries in the South to be upfront in these discussions. because we can provide the renewable energy that will be needed in the future. And I'm not talking only about local production, but I also mean about exporting renewable energy. Because what is the main advantage of hydrogen is basically that you have electricity in the form of molecules, right? And molecules are easier to transport than electrons. It's just a fact, right? So if you have electricity in the future and you can transport it via a pipeline, that's a huge advantage. And it's a huge advantage for any country that can provide this. And I think Greece needs to be, at the forefront of these developments. And that's just my perspective. And I think that, we need to come back to the initial discussion, about the ambitious targets or not. I think that yes, ambitious targets are needed. If you don't put ambitious targets to the fore, you will not be able to catch up to the developments in other European countries.
Thank you, Mr. Moraitis. Mr. Tomaszewski, what is going on now? Let's discuss Poland. You are delaying the phase out of coal-related activities, and due to two reasons. It's energy security and the social impact, which we all understand. Which do you think is the most important that is an obstacle for you in Poland?
We're not even delaying, but we haven't yet choose which year we're going to phase out coal. So this is still in front of the government to do. We believe that this is going to happen before 2040, like with this way of CO2 prices going up and what is happening in energy sector with the plans of the new investments. We believe that the last kilowatt hour of electricity from coal will be produced somewhere in next 19 years. Of course, if nothing extreme happens on the way. So I believe that these two issues you mentioned are both very important. Energy security and this social way to treat the whole this process. And we still don't have the main answers how we want to do it. The very good example of this is the solar revolution, which is happening in Poland. We just a few years ago, 4 years ago, we have in Poland less than a few hundred prosumers. Now we have almost 500,000 prosumers who are producing their own electricity from the rooftops, and 4 gigawatts of photovoltaics connected to the grid. And it was built just with small amount of public money, which went with very simple supporting system and helped families just to install those panels on the rooftop. And this now is the main engine of our transformation. We are waiting for the offshore winds, which will be the second engine of our transformation, and the nuclear, which will happen in probably 2 decades. The problem with the politics and creating the policy of it is that we're still creating too many assumptions on technology that still are not mature enough to say that we will be for sure able to use it. The hydrogen creates enormous perspective. Poland is preparing it's in final stages. The hydrogen strategy. We will produce it from in electrolyzers connected with the offshore wind on the Baltic Sea, and use it in our CHP plants, power plants, in gas network, and so on. So it creates enormous opportunities, but we still don't know when exactly it is going to happen and how much we should invest now, knowing that in the second part of this decade, we can have blackouts, and maybe not on the scale like in Texas or something, or the regions in the United States, but this challenge will happen, because we have to also remember that we now talk about the pace of the transformation, but our infrastructure in whole Europe will be also challenged by the climate change. meaning snowstorms, meaning very low temperatures, rains, floods, droughts, which will kill coal, but possibly also nuclear reactors, gas power plants. So we are moving from way of thinking about the energy sector centralized from the big blocks to the decentralized system where small units are important, connected in virtual power plants. This is an enormous challenge, but I think that we have the dirtiest energy mix in whole Europe, but it creates also a great opportunity. We can make more steps forward than our European partners, investing in already major technologies, like for example photovoltaics or wind energy. But as I said before, this must be a sustained debate, and the social factor here will be absolutely crucial to make this process secured.
Thank you very much. Now, Dr. Tzortzis, I have two questions for you, and I think they are connected. The one is, which investment do you think that will have a better social impact and economic impact in the areas in Greece that are hugely affected, badly affected by this transition? That's my first question. And my second, which comes from the people that are watching us, is, have you communicated to the people with a clear way what is going to happen to them, and what is going to happen with this energy transition?
Right. Thank you very much. I start from the second question. Actually, we've been trying, like I said in my presentation, to be very closely in touch with the people affected. And it is then that we realize that the situation is in a very bad state. So I think that, of course, it's important that the message from us towards them has to be clear and straight, but we have already accepted, we have already taken a very clear and straightforward message from them to us, which says that it needs something to be done, and this needs to be done now, not even now, it's yesterday. So we just, although it seems that we are ahead of developments, I think we're just following developments, because this situation, like I said, is already happening, has already been happening the last 10 years. The PPC, the Public Power Corporation, of course, realized that this is not a viable activity to use lignite for power generation. So eventually they started to use lignite power plants less and less. So this, of course, affects the life perspective for the local communities, and we try to combat this. And actually, it's something that, of course, we run against time. It's something that we need to do fast in order to be able to make the best out of the European sources, out of the European financial resources. We're not a country of the north which has an abundance of sources, and we have to be very quick in making the best out of what is available to us. There is a big opportunity presented by the Recovery and Resilience Fund that is provided to Greece, and we have to take full advantage of this. And that's why we're going to have this transfer of lands from from PPC to the Greek state, in order to be able right away to start employing people in repurposing these lands. So coming to your second question, I will say that the first and most effective actual investment in those lands is going to come from the Greek state. Like our Prime Minister has announced, 300 million euros are made available by the Resilience and Recovery Fund just for this, just to change the whole situation of the lands that are going to be repurposed in order to be able to receive whatever investments there are there to be employed. We have to think out of the box, to think of other ways of doing things. And you know that we have to face all this monster of Greek bureaucracy. That's something that we need to tackle. And that's why we're, of course, between these two, skill and Henri. One is, of course, the need of the local people to find solutions soon. And it's like I said once in an interview, that we have to move very fast, like a fast train on old, very old tracks. So we just need to tackle all this situation with a system that hasn't learned to move fast. We have to make it do things in a faster way than it used to. And that's the only way that this whole experiment is going to be successful. And we shouldn't forget that we are part of a European Union, which is not yet just whatever union. It will be a European energy union. So with regard to questions like energy security and whatever other questions may arise from other European countries, we should never forget that one of very important policies that is underway to be reconnected, to have established these energy interconnections between those countries, and of course the application of the target model will reassure Greece and other countries that want to move forward faster, that they're going to have a backup with being provided by other European countries, other European nations. We want to set an example in the European Union, but of course we don't want to be alone in this. That's why, like what Mr. Moraitis just said, we need to move very carefully. And of course, we examine ways to secure the future of energy security regarding this transition use of gas, of natural gas. That's something that we have to push forward and persuade our colleagues in Brussels that it's a sound way of doing things. We're in a completely different stage of development compared to the North, but we're in the same boat, like the whole planet, so to speak. So we need to do things in a good order and in a good cooperation. And I see that Greece sets an example for this cooperation, having the biggest Greek company, PPC, working together with the Greek state in order to be able, that's going to be a win-win situation. So the Greek state will manage to secure these lands for the good of the people of the areas, and PPC will come out of this situation that is not going to be economically viable for it anymore.
Thank you, Dr. Tzortzis. Now, Dr. Bardt, do you believe that in Germany there is a danger that this longer coal phase out will create problems in the areas that are hit there? There will be a slower recovery affecting these regions and these communities?
Well, I don't think that the time is a problem here. It's a long period where you are able to adapt, but it's also quick enough that you see first movements here and there. And then, I mean, there are two main regions. One in the western part of Germany, north of Cologne, which is a pretty highly industrialized region, and I guess the people who work in the mining industry and in the coal power plants will be able to find good jobs. We are looking for qualified engineers and so on everywhere. So that will be not the biggest problem, and that's a part where that transformation starts early. In the eastern part of Germany, it will be more problematic because, as I tried to mention earlier, there's in the coal region there's not much industry around it. So there are not many small things that may grow. So we are looking at a region where it's really different to organize this kind of structural change. And a lot of money has been allocated for that. It's a total of 40 billion euros for the next decades for both regions, which is an awful lot of money, and maybe it's too much money. And if you look at the consequences of decarbonization, we only look at coal now and at electricity, but I mean decarbonization is much more. It's housing, it's transport, and it's industry. And I think what's happening in the manufacturing sector, and are we able to give a perspective for investors in, let's say, energy-intensive industries in our countries, that they be able to be competitive with much higher carbon costs and energy costs in the future, while in other regions of the world it may be cheaper. So are we able to give them the confidence to invest here? And if not, then there's much more at stake than those 60,000 jobs I was talking about earlier.
Thank you, Dr. Bardt. Mr. Moraitis, what do you think will be the role of natural gas? Dr. Tzortzis told us a little bit about that also, and for the green gases, and of course hydrogen, which the European Commission places a lot of hope in hydrogen.
First of all, I think I just wanted to add something to what Dr. Bardt said, that regarding investments. And I think this is a key word, because we discussed about the social implications of the phase out of coal in the region of Western Macedonia. Dr. Tzortzis just explained it very good. It's you have a lot of problems that will occur once you have phased out, right? We are talking about unemployment. We're talking about people who are qualified but will stay out of jobs, and so on and so forth. And I think the key component here is investments. And I think this is also something where the South, for once, has an advantage compared to the North, if you want. Because if we want to pursue a new generation of energy, which is green, and we are talking about the decarbonization and the Energiewende and all these things, then the South will, I said it earlier, will play a key role when it comes to the renewable energy sources, right? Which in turn means that it's much more attractive to investments compared to the North, right? But of course, if we wait, if we delay, if we don't do the right actions, if the political leadership does not act quickly, then of course this opportunity will be gone. In the case of Western Macedonia, I think if you look at the region and how it's how it was perceived until recently, I think there's a huge potential to really create a new energy hub, because Western Macedonia was an energy hub and remains an energy hub, but you can transform this energy hub to a green energy hub in the future. And I think this is of key importance. And if you are able to attract investments, foreign investments, of course, who will do manufacturing parts there, will create an economy, a green economy on the local level, then you will be able to really tackle these problems, these social problems, and you will be able to at least limit them, if not, abolishing them. That's just as a compliment. Sorry for taking the time. So now for the natural gas, I think we already talked a bit about it, and I think natural gas will play a very, very important role in order to transition to the green reality that we want. And I think natural gas will play a huge role in heating. It will play a huge role in even producing hydrogen. Because if we're talking about hydrogen and a hydrogen economy, that's what I said earlier, then you need to prepare this, right? You need to build it up gradually. You can't go from black to green in a day. You need to have a transition phase in order to, ramp up, the hydrogen economy as we know, the value chain of hydrogen. And then you can talk about greening the whole process. And this is why natural gas in combination with CCS, CCU will play a major role in the transition phase. And of course, once we reach the point where we can actually green the whole energy mix, then hydrogen is, of course, if we talk about electrolysis, so the renewable energy sources that you use in order to split water and create hydrogen and have basically green hydrogen at your hands, then you have done everything right, because then you can use the already existing infrastructure from natural gas, meaning the pipelines and everything, with repurposing them, of course, retrofitting them, of course. I'm not talking about just using them like this, but there are ways in order to take advantage of what is already there. And this is also very important, because you have something that can turn green in the future, and that will be able to use something, in this case infrastructure, that was black previously. So it's a perfect match, basically.
Well, thank you, Mr. Moraitis. Mr. Tomaszewski will listen to what Dr. Tzortzis and Dr. Bardt and Mr. Moraitis are saying about natural gas. And I'm going to go a step forward, because we will talk now about Poland. Poland has announced a turn towards nuclear energy and natural gas. But where are you going to find the money? I mean, can you afford? Is Polish economy ready to afford this transition? Because they all seem to agree that we have to have a transition period before we get rid of coal and lignite and all of that. But we need also the money to do that. Are there enough money? Are there enough investors to do that?
It's a very, very good question. No, the Polish economy has to be ready for this, because there is no other way. We have to make this transformation, and the problem is that we still we don't have the plan which is connected with the new aims of the European climate policy. So we are still in a blind spot. We're looking for these solutions. The cost of this whole transformation will be enormous. It is Polish government estimated on 350 billions of euros for all the process till 2040, and not just reaching the climate neutrality, only this next 2 decades. The whole nuclear project alone will cost around 20 billions of euros. So these costs are enormous, and to make it happen, we of course need allies. Without citizens, without, for example, prosumers, it won't be able. At least this is happening now. So Polish government needs to speed up this process. But the process is more complex. It touches all the sectors of the economy, of our way of life. It will transform it tremendously. So being most dependent on coal state in the European Union means that we have to be aware how huge this change will be. So we are a little bit in a moment that governments cannot postpone any more decisions, because it was like the tradition of Polish governments all the hard decisions about energy sector or mining sector were moved ad calendas grecas for the holy never, just to make some space for politicians. So now it is impossible. We have to shut mines, we have to shut down coal power plants, and try to find a way to get our electricity still in the grid. So I think we reached a moment when we're gonna have to find those investors, the support to make this process available, to make this process happen. But I believe that it's not enough. We need to have something like the new social contract. We need to have some kind of energy Churchill who will step in and say that, yeah, there will be sweat, there will be blood, there will be tears here in this process, but we have to reach to and win this war with fossil fuels, and because on the end of it we will be able to save the planet for our children with less polluted air. So it is really necessary, but I see the same challenge in other European states, that we have to stand up to this truth, to this new reality, and make this make this process affordable and secure for the poorer part of the society. But yeah, it's reachable, and I think that it will be fascinating to watch it, how it will change our life and the economy of whole European Union.
Thank you. Well, as our discussion is coming to an end, I want to place one last question to you and talk to all of you. Talk about a paradox that I think is happening. Well, what I'm talking about is that member states are paying coal-fueled factories, because they are polluting, to stop working, to close down. And at the same time, in the European Union, we stop subsidies for renewables. Why is that happening? What do you think? Where do you find the logic in this happening? Dr. Tzortzis?
Thank you. First of all, in Greece doesn't happen, at least at the moment. What happens is that, like I said, we come to a sort of an agreement with PPC, with Public Power Corporation, so that we'll have a fair deal, and that will use their lands. So actual PPC is not going to be in any way, like being given any money by the state. It's going to be like a deal that the state will take in charge and put this land to these new uses. So for Greece, that's not a question. Talking about the renewables just mentioned, I think that through my experience as a legal counsel in Regulatory Authority for Energy for many years, since its establishment, I came to realize that at the beginning, renewables were treated like a source that needed to be supported, and that was during the era that renewables were still very expensive. It's been many years since, and things have changed. Now we're talking about a new target model. We're talking about a common European energy union. We're talking about completely different things. And I think that it's important to treat renewables as equal regarding other sources. And since we're talking about renewables that they want to be competitive, they have to be competitive in the market. They cannot just be subsidized outside of the market. They're not treated like something, abnormal anymore. They have to be treated like the main source of power. So since we're talking about this new situation, I think there is no other way but being treated equally and fairly in a competitive environment in which there are not going to be any state subsidies to actually make this environment, so to speak, problematic. So I would like to also stress that by getting into this new idea of stopping the use of lignite, we have an abundance, we have a wealth of opportunity for investment, like the other very eloquently said the other speakers. So I think that that's the time that we have to attract new investment, because we want to be in the forefront of all this. And Greece wants to be a leader not only of this transition, but a leader in investment. And since the new era is going to be an era of renewables, we all very well know how advantage we have in this case. And we should never forget that we're not talking about only Western Macedonia, megalopolis. We're talking about the islands. We have a vision about green islands, islands that are interconnected with the mainland, islands that don't have any problems with blackouts, islands that they use solely renewables to cover their energy needs. So our effort is going to cover these areas as well, because you know how important the island regions are for Greece. And since we want to become an energy tourism destination, why not? We can develop new innovative renewables in the islands. And I think that since we're talking about a new situation being developed in Europe, Greece can set an example, a good example this time.
Thank you, Dr. Tzortzis. Dr. Bardt, what is your input in that? What is your opinion on this paradox, or maybe not, as Dr. Tzortzis explained?
Yeah, thank you very much. It's a good question, and I think it really looks like a paradox. I think it is not, because these are two different things which happen at the same time. So first of all, we don't have any subsidies for coal anymore. We've had them until 2 years ago in case of hard coal, but we don't have them anymore. So we don't subsidize carbon-intensive electricity production. We pay money for the closure of existing and running power plants, which are totally legal. I mean, the power plants are totally legal. The companies have the right to use them. They've invested in them. And so if we take that right to produce anymore, they need to be compensated for that. That has been organized by an auctioning mechanism, which hopefully tends to well, as little compensation as necessary, and as long as the emission, the carbon price in the ETS is high, that amount of money which we have to give them as compensation will be lower. On the other hand side, we still, and that's right now, calculation is about 4.5 billion euros for that. So it's 10% of what we are giving to the regions. On the other hand side, we pay 24 billion a year for renewable energies, and not for those which has been or which are invested and built up now or in the last few years, but mainly for those which have been built 10 to 15 years ago. We've built a lot of wind and solar power about 10 years ago, when it was still very expensive, and we're still paying for them. That's at the 24 billion a year. And the new ones still get money, still get subsidies, also a kind of auctioning mechanism. So we want them to get the subsidies they need, but as the lower the better, in order to force them to become more competitive. And I mean, what's the long-term perspective of an energy market? It can't be that we have 100% renewables, which are all subsidized. And so we, one day or the other, must phase out of these schemes. And so reducing the subsidies here is a mechanism there. And the fact that the increase of renewables is not as quick as we wanted it has nothing to do with missing money, but has much more to do with regulation and the lack of property and so on. So indeed, I understand it looks like a paradox, but I think it isn't, because both is paid for reducing emissions.
Thank you, Dr. Bardt. Mr. Moraitis, what do you think?
Sorry, had to unmute. I agree, of course, with what my colleague said, and I think if you want to embark into this discussion, and let's say that you say, okay, renewable energy sources are getting cheaper because of the advancement of technologies, of higher efficient solar panels, of more efficient wind parks, and so on and so forth. This is something that you could be seen as something positive. So if you gradually phase out of these subsidies for renewables, it seems like you are trusting in the fact that prices are going down for electricity from renewable energy sources, which is a great thing, right? I mean, this is what we all want, because at the end of the day, this price, the electricity price from renewable energy sources, will be a key component on what technologies you will deploy and when. That's clear.
Thank you, Mr. Moraitis. Mr. Tomaszewski, do you agree? Because everyone thinks to agree that it's not a paradox. It's how things should be.
Yeah, we're heading to the moment when we don't need subsidies to sustain the renewables in a grid. The technologies are getting mature, so this level of support will be dropping every year. Of course, not with every technology. Like, for example, offshore wind will needs on the new markets, like in Poland, will need for years some help, or like hydrogen. So we need those policies to push forward development of technology. And I think that the subsidies to the fossil fuels are going away. Those regulations are very clear coming from Brussels. We won't be able to subsidize coal power plants after 2025. So this problem will be solved by itself. So we, at the end of this process, we hopefully reach a moment when the electricity will be cheap, and we will be able to get it whenever we want. But to reach this moment, we need to get through really tough path. So let us hope that we will be able to do it.
Thank you very much, and I want to ask you now, because we're coming to an end in this discussion, if you feel that we missed something, that you want to add something that maybe we didn't discuss. Of course, this discussion could go on longer and longer. It's an issue that's going to be open for many years to come, and the pandemic maybe helped towards going to a new era of energy. Do you want to add something?
If I may just
Yes.
say a couple of words. First of all, yes, I think that the pandemic, highlighted some of our major flaws when it comes to energy management on a European level. I think that it's now very obvious that we need to act fast. This is another reason why, we should set ambitious targets in the future, not only in regard to the phase out of coal, but in regard to the energy transition itself, and in achieving the goals of the Energy Green Deal. I think this is of major importance. But I wanted to, for the closing, say the following, that I think that as Greece is a country that
We have a problem, I think.
You have the advantage.
If you want to repeat yourself, because we had a problem with your connection.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, now very well.
Okay, sorry. So what I wanted to say is that Greece has a huge potential. And I think that if Greece decides to be a first mover, then, you will have the advantage of getting first to the whole funding schemes that are available out there. And you will be able to utilize this in order to build something up that will last for the future. And I think this is something that, you know, Greek policymakers and decision takers need to have in mind, that, you know, we need to be a first mover, not just for the sake of saying we are a first mover, but actually in order to take advantage of the tools that are out there. And if you are a first mover, you can take advantage of these tools first. And this is important, I think, especially for countries like Greece.
Thank you very much. I don't know if anyone else wants to add something, or we are coming to an end. Dr. Tzortzis, yes.
Of course, to thank you for this excellent coordination, and thank you, Konrad-Adenauer-Stiftung and the Greek Energy Forum for giving us this opportunity. It's important for us not just staying behind our desks and just seeing what is happening out there. We need to take action, and talking to such an exclusive audience and colleagues is always a wealth of information for us, which we want to take into account. And of course, what Mr. Moraitis just said is our key element in our effort. We need to be in the forefront of all this in order to be able to secure the finances for it. So we're not in a position to be relaxed and to be secure that something will happen out of the blue. We just need to create this thing happening, and we just need to find solutions soon. And of course, it's our main, so to speak, optimism to be, as a country, open for business and being a very attractive destination for investment. And I think that right now in Europe, we have set the standards regarding this. So we're all here waiting for proposals. We are in the process of examining the proposals that have already been placed. And that's the message I want to pass, that we're open for business. We're here, and we're going to be leading this process. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you. Dr. Bardt, Mr. Tomaszewski, do you want to add anything?
I just wanted to say thank you for the wonderful discussion. I've learned a lot, so for me it was worth it. Thank you.
I also want to thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for being with us here and helping us understand what is happening in the new energy market and the social impact that the changes, of course, have. Always the changes have impact to the people. Thank you very much, and I thank you also, ladies and gentlemen, that have watched us tonight. Have a nice evening and be safe. Keep safe.
Thank you.